Hey folks, welcome back. So, a lot of you had some questions about the potatoes. I wrote them down. Some of them y'all asked the same questions, so I'm just going to cover it all. And because I'm old and because I'm tired, I had to write them down. So, the first question is what do you do with the button potatoes? What I do is if I'm making a stew or a soup, usually a stew, I will throw them in whole and let them cook. Sometimes I'll cut them in half and I will fry them up as hash brown type thing, fried potatoes. That's pretty, excuse me, that's pretty good too. Um, do I plant a potato seed or do I plant old potatoes? Well, I do both. I do both. So if I am fortunate enough to have seed that are viable for the next season, I will use those. Shay's really good at keeping hers from season to season. I am not because I forget about them. Yeah, yeah, folks. She's better at it than I am. So cousin Shay, she will use her last year's potatoes for seed the next year. If I am that lucky, I will do the same. But we have, at about a half hour from here, we have an Aubuchon who has a really good deal on Kennebecs and Red Pontiac, my two favorite. Those two I always grow. So a 5-pound bag of seed for like $4, that's pretty cheap. So that's what I do if times got hard and I had to save my seed. From year to year, I would pay better attention and I would do a much better job. So that's how I do it. Can I reuse the sawdust? Yes, you can reuse the sawdust. You will see that the sawdust was fresh sawdust when I put it down in the garden. And you can see where I added the amendments. The fertilizer will break it down. Me pouring around will break it down, and the blood meal will break it down, right? So it won't be fresh sawdust. Actually, the sawdust will be more beneficial to you the next year. But chances are, because that is breaking down, you probably won't have enough to hill the potatoes up the next year, so you're going to have to add some more sawdust anyway. So that's what I do. How do I store the potatoes? Well, if you've grown potatoes, you want to store them like in a root cellar or whatever, you know you cannot wash them, right? You know you've got to harden them off for about 2 weeks out of the sun in a cool, airy, shady environment, right? So that'll toughen up the skin and they will store better. So that's the first thing you do. And then store them where it's cool and dry. I wouldn't, back years ago, my grandparents had a wooden box. It was 4x4x4. And they stored their potatoes one on top of the other in that potato bin. And they had a lot of rotten potatoes. And folks, rotten potatoes put off gases that not only stink, they are very dangerous, all right? There was a family in Russia years ago that one of the family members went down into their basement to get some potatoes for supper. That family member never came back up the stairs. So another family member went down to see what was going on. That family member never went upstairs. And they went through 3 family members when I believe it was a teenage boy who knew something was dreadfully wrong and went and got help. And the gases killed his 3 family members, folks, okay? So they've got to be stored in an airy spot, folks, all right? Please do your research. Please do your research. So let's see. So I store them in a cool, dry, dark, airy spot, okay? You can either make a root cellar, if you already have a root cellar, if you've got an outbuilding that doesn't freeze, and you can kind of keep it from freezing. Up here it's pretty hard. You can also can them, folks. You can slice them up and you can dry them. You can make them into potato powder. You can make them into potato flakes. You can freeze dry them. You can parboil them and cut them into wedges or fries or slices, and then you can throw them in the freezer. There's a lot of things you can do with potatoes. What I plan on doing with potatoes are some that were damaged or something that I know won't keep in storage for a long time. I will throw those into jars. Now, last year I made a bunch of fries, French fries, home fries. They're about a 1/2 inch by a 1/2 inch by about this long. Laid the quart jar, wide mouth, quart jar on its side and just started putting them in there and made really good fries, folks. Really, really good fries. You take that jar off the shelf and you pop the lid open and you drain the water out because it might be starchy, right? That starch isn't going to hurt you, folks, but just drain that out. Drain as much as you can out. Put them in a frying pan with some oil. Heat the frying pan up a little bit and fry them up. When the part that's laying on the frying pan gets a little brown, just turn them over and just keep rotating them. They're pretty good, folks. You just can't muscle them. You got to be gentle, okay? So, let's see. When did I plant my potatoes? Well, I went back down in my playlist, and all it said was 3 months, which would be June, and that would be about right. So about June, folks. So I have my potato growing from start until this last video, which I've got to put in the playlist. I think there's 5 videos. There's more that's about growing in sawdust, but there's at least, when I get done filming this, I'll make sure those 2 new videos I just put out goes into the playlist. So that'll be 6 videos from start to finish on how I planted the potatoes. I brought you step by step by step. And if you go down into my playlist and watch those, it's going to give you a pretty good idea. Now, if you have a lot of nitrogen in your soil, or you use a high nitrogen fertilizer, you may want to cut back on the nitrogen because nitrogen has a tendency to make potatoes scabby, right? There's nothing wrong with a scabby potato, folks. The only thing about a scabby potato, well, there's 2 things. 1, it doesn't look very good. But 2, scabby potatoes usually don't store for very long. So if I put too much blood meal down and in a certain spot and I find those potatoes are scabby, I'll just make sure I peel them and jar them up, or peel them and eat them fresh, right? So that's what I do. Everything that you need to grow potatoes, like I just showed you, all that information is in my playlist under growing in sawdust, folks. So if you have any questions, you can ask. I'll be more than happy to answer your questions, but I think I was pretty thorough. I'm pretty sure I was pretty thorough, but there still might be some questions, so feel free to ask. So, for those of you who have been following me for a little bit, this is almost 10 minutes long, folks. You know that I had a really crappy carrot season, right? So they just washed away, folks. And by the time I realized they weren't going to sprout, they were, I think, 8 carrots. 8 carrots, folks. So I just pulled them up. And again, if you're going to store carrots, just like potatoes, just like beets, just like turnip, you do not wash them, right? You just kind of wipe the dirt off and then store them that way, right? Root vegetables, as you all know, especially carrots, beets, anything like that, it should be either layered in sawdust or layered in sand. Damp sand. Damp sand works exceptionally well here in Maine. And then just put them down your root cellar or in a back room, right? That stays cool. So anyway, I pulled just a handful of carrots, and I should have brought them up. I didn't even think about it, folks. So I pulled those carrots up, and I cut the tops off. I rinsed them off, and then I am allowing them to dry inside my woodshed, because carrot tops are edible, folks. They're very high in vitamin A, vitamin C, all of that. They just don't taste very good as a green, right? But if I'm going to take all my greens and my tops and some of my beets and turnip and all of that, and I'm going to dry it and I'm going to powder it and put them in capsule form, then it doesn't matter if the carrot tops are bitter or not. I'm not going to taste it, right? It's just I'm going to swallow it and it's going to dissolve in my belly, right? So I just want to remind folks that there's a lot of things in your garden that will be bitter by this time of year. It still has a lot of nutrients, and if you just take them and throw them in your compost, you're throwing away vitamins, you're throwing away minerals, you're throwing away food, folks, and we can't afford to do that, right? We can't afford to do that. So anything that's up and going by that is edible, right? Some things are not edible. Make sure your leaves and your plants are edible on your food, okay? Please do your research. And then just dry them up, right? Or put them through a blender and add honey and whatever else you want, and then drink it as a smoothie, right? Or shots, right? Vitamin shots, folks. Well, you can put alcohol in if you want to. You can do that. So anyway, this is 13 minutes long, way longer than I wanted it to be by at least 3 minutes, right? So I'm a little bit green. I've been handling all kinds of green. So if you have any questions, please post them down below. I am unable to comment, folks. For some reason, I am unable to give a thumbs up. I am unable to do a heart, and YouTube is not letting me know when somebody has commented on my videos for like the past 2 weeks. So I have to go into a bunch of videos and go to comments and press the newest comment button, and that'll bring me up. But then again, I can read it, but I can't type, or I can't like, and I can't give a heart, folks. So it's not that I'm not reading them. I am reading them. So please be patient. YouTube's being a little funky. Alright, so thank you for coming back by. Thank you for any new subscribers. And I guess I'll catch you when I do another video. Alright? Thank you.